Today, we are diving into the emotional root causes of adrenal fatigue or adrenal failure. Welcome back to the Mind Change Podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean. If you are loving these episodes, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us reach more people. So what is adrenal fatigue? Before we dive into the emotional root causes, let's take a moment to understand what adrenal fatigue or failure actually is from a physiological perspective. Your adrenal glands are small but mighty organs that sit on top of your kidneys. They're responsible for producing hormones that regulate your stress response, primarily cortisol and adrenaline, but as well as hormones that help you balance your blood sugar, blood pressure, and energy levels. In a healthy state, these glands respond to short-term stress by increasing cortisol, helping regulate our fight or flee. But when stress becomes chronic, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or even spiritual, the adrenals can get overworked. So over time, they might start to burn out. And that looks like producing either too much or too little cortisol. That is often referred to as adrenal fatigue. And that's a term more commonly used in functional and integrative medicine, even though it's not widely recognized in conventional medical textbooks. Now, in more advanced cases, this can progress to adrenal insufficiency or adrenal failure, which are more severe and potentially dangerous conditions that often require a little bit more work to be done. So, symptoms of adrenal fatigue may include things like chronic fatigue, even after sleeping, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, low blood pressure, dizziness, cravings for salt or sugar, mood swings, anxiety, sometimes feeling that wired but tired feeling at night, and sometimes even a weakened immune system. But at Mind Change, we don't just ask what's going on with the body. We ask, why is this happening now? What emotional or subconscious patterns might be driving this constant state of stress and survival? That's where today's episode begins. You may have heard the phrase running on empty, and it's actually a perfect metaphor for adrenal fatigue. But what does that actually mean emotionally? What might be driving someone to burn out their own life force? What internal conflicts are we carrying that slowly bleed out our energy day after day? So as always, we like to go back and look at possible childhood environments, situations, cycles that might be contributing. So let's go and imagine maybe a story that helps put into perspective a childhood environment that contributes later on to the development of adrenal issues like fatigue or failure. So let's imagine a little girl. Let's say she's 7 years old. She's watching her parents fight again. She's sitting at the kitchen table, silently trying to finish her homework while her nervous system is on high alert. She has taken the role as peacemaker, mediator, the fixer. In her mind, she thinks, if I can just stay calm, if I can just hold it all together, maybe it won't get so bad. Maybe no one else will fall apart tonight. So that little girl becomes kind of like the family hoist or the family linchpin. She, in her body, feels like she holds everyone's emotions, but no one holds hers. So fast forward that 30 years. She's exhausted. She's anxious. She wakes up tired and pushes through her day, running on caffeine, willpower, and maybe guilt. So then she goes in, she talks to her doctor, she gets her labs run, and it comes back adrenal fatigue. But this isn't just physical. It's also deeply emotional. Another story. Let's say that there's a boy who grows up in a family where love is conditional. So he's praised for achievement, for doing, for performing. There's no room for rest, no space for just being. So he becomes the overachiever, the perfectionist. He's terrified of failing, not because he cares about failure itself, but failure means rejection. Failure means I'm not lovable. So his adrenals, well, they are constantly pumping cortisol just to keep up with the pressure until they can't anymore. Or what about a little girl who grows up with a chronically ill parent? From the time she was old enough to carry a glass of water, she became a caretaker. At 8 years old, she's waking her younger siblings for school, checking mom's medication schedule, making sure dinner is ready by the time dad comes home. Now, no one ever told her to do it. She just knew she needed to do that. There was no room for play, no space to cry, and every moment of peace came with guilt. Every time she smiled, she felt that it was undeserved. She internalized a belief that my needs don't matter. So years later, in adulthood, she finds herself unable to say no. She's the go-to person for everyone else's emergencies. And her adrenals, they've been in survival mode for decades. All right, one more story. Let's say it's a boy who's raised by a parent who praises strength, but punishes vulnerability. So every time this little boy cries, he's mocked or ignored. Every time he shows fear, he's told to man up. So he learns to armor up emotionally, to stuff down every emotion and just keep moving. So he becomes the helper, the protector, the one who's always fine, even when he's not. So by adulthood, he's developed a deep fear of letting anyone see his weakness. He doesn't ask for help, ever. And that armor he built as a child, well, now it's become a prison, keeping the world out, but also keeping exhaustion in. His body is screaming for rest, but he doesn't know how to stop without losing his very identity. So those are a few of the many childhood environments that could be contributing. Let's look at some of the ways that this shows up in adulthood. So adrenal fatigue often shows up in adults who have a deep, lifelong fear of being unworthy or unlovable unless they're doing something. These people tend to have difficulty setting boundaries with toxic or energy draining people. They frequently have a pattern of over-responsibility, feeling like it's their job to hold everything and everyone together. They might be in a perfectionism loop, rooted in fear of judgment or punishment. They may have control issues as a trauma response to early life chaos or neglect. It also shows up in those who experience an identity crisis, like when a long-held belief system collapses. So like imagine finding out that something you've based your whole life around. This could be religion, sports, a relationship, a family story, an identity wasn't true. So sometimes that happens as we become adults and we look back and now we have, other perspective. We can sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, everything I thought I knew isn't what I thought it was. And that crash can feel like a spiritual death. And the thing that it has the most effects on is our adrenals. So some of the other symptoms here and their emotional roots are, like we said, chronic fatigue, even after you get a lot of sleep, sometimes feeling emotionally numb, detached, loss of motivation, feeling purposeless. Some people have panic attacks or anxiety for no logical reason. Some people may hold a constant low-level feeling of dread or stress, like, when's the other shoe gonna drop? I need to be prepared. Something bad could happen, especially when things get good. If things get good, then they are like, something even worse is coming on the other side of that. These people tend to lack joy or desire to connect with others. And often there's a quiet little voice inside whispering, what's the point? Like, I can't keep doing this. I don't know if I even care anymore. From a metaphysical perspective, the adrenals, like we said, they sit above the kidneys, right? They're energetically tied to fear, survival, and sorrow. So if we've been living in a constant state of survival, then we burn out the very glands that were designed to protect us from short-term danger. And then collaboration feels impossible. So remember, these are all collaborating, right? With our system, with our kidneys, everything like that. And so when there's a dysfunction in our adrenal gland, it actually often comes from this feeling of not being able to safely collaborate with somebody like a family member. And then that translates later into having issues around collaboration in relationships, with teams, or even sometimes with ourselves. So that's the belief that our body's against us. And those glands, our adrenal glands, are reflecting that disharmony. Emotionally, we may feel lost, like sheep left far from the herd, wandering without direction, disconnected from our values, from our essence. And the deeper truth is we may not even know who we are anymore without all the stress, striving, and proving. And that's where we get into that tricky but important concept of secondary gains, those hidden emotional benefits that we may unconsciously be receiving from our illness. So for adrenal fatigue, that could be our body saying, hey, I'm doing this because I finally am getting permission to rest without guilt. It might be a valid excuse to say no to toxic people, to toxic situations without having to justify it. It allows us to avoid certain responsibilities or social interactions. It can often create a buffer against emotional confrontation. For some, it can also be a way to gain sympathy or care that you never felt like you were allowed to ask for directly. So remember, it's not about blame. It's always about awareness. So what can you do if this is hitting home for you? First, don't blame yourself. And if you are blaming yourself, stop. Adrenal fatigue is not weakness. It's adaptation. It's your body saying this is unsustainable. Something has to change. So we want to get curious. Where in your life are you still maybe acting out of childhood patterns of overfunctioning, overgiving, over-controlling? Maybe you're still trying to protect somebody other than yourself. And most importantly, who do you think you have to be in order to finally be loved? This is the kind of deep work we do every day with the Mind Change Method. It's neuroscience-based, trauma-informed, and more importantly, it's transformational. So if you're ready to finally shift these deep-rooted patterns and reclaim your energy, we invite you to join us at one of our upcoming Mind Change events. We have live events. We have online events. We have retreats. We have so many different opportunities. Read the book if you haven't read the book. Our courses come with sessions and they come with monthly mentoring calls. So a lot of opportunities to go deeper and dive into this and finally listen to what our body might be telling us. Until next time, thank you for being with me on the Mind Change podcast, where we are changing the world one mind at a time.